My name was scrubbed from the welcome sign like I was a mistake. This was supposed to be a happy day, the baby shower for my first grandchild, but my son's wife's parents made it clear I didn't belong. People in their fine clothes would walk up to the beautiful sign, see the names Richard and Eleanor Vance hosting the party, and then their eyes would find me, the old woman standing alone. They'd whisper to each other, and I could feel their pity. No one said a word to me. Friend, before I go on, let me ask you, would you do me a kindness? Tap subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It helps me see just how far my story reaches. You see, Eleanor, my daughter-in-law's mother walked right past me like I was invisible. I tried to say hello, to offer her a warm smile, but she just looked through me. My son, Mark, was across the room, trapped. He saw me. I know he did. He saw the hurt on my face, but he just gave a little helpless shrug and looked away. It was the loneliest feeling in the world. They had put me in a pretty cage, but it was still a cage, and I was all alone. What was I supposed to do? I decided I had to try. I wouldn't let them make me small. So I walked over to a group of women who were admiring the huge, fancy cake. They were all laughing, their diamonds sparkling in the light. I took a deep breath and said, "Hello, I'm Mark's mother, Carol." They stopped talking for a second. They looked at my simple blue dress, then back at each other. One of them gave me a smile so fake it could have cracked. Then they just turned their backs on me and started talking again, like I had never even spoken. I felt my cheeks burn with shame. I was an invisible woman. My gift for the baby, a blanket I had spent weeks knitting, suddenly felt silly and cheap in my bag. They were giving trust funds and brand new cars, and I had a ball of yarn. It wasn't about the money, you see. It was about love. But in that room, love didn't seem to be worth very much. The hurt in my chest was turning into something else, something hard and angry. They thought they could just ignore me, but they didn't know the fire they were starting. Just when I thought I would turn and run, a young woman with a list in her hand and a cold smile walked right up to me. She was about to show me just how unwelcome I really was. The young woman with the clipboard didn't even look at me. "Name?" she asked, her finger already scanning the list. "Carol Thompson," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Her finger went down the page once, then twice. I thought for a second she was going to tell me I wasn't on the list at all. Then she said, "Ah, table 12. She pointed, not with her hand, but with a flick of her chin. She pointed to a dark corner of the big party tent, a place I hadn't even noticed before. A small, lonely table was sitting there, right next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. Clash, bang. The sound of pots and pans was the only music I had. I sat there, watching my son Mark and his wife Emily laughing at the head table with her parents, Richard and Eleanor. They had put me as far away as possible. It was a clear message: you are not part of this family. A waiter hurried past and dropped a napkin. As I bent down to pick it up for him, he leaned in close, his eyes wide with fear. "Don't let him see you saw anything," he whispered with a quick, nervous look toward Richard. But what on earth had I seen? The waiter's words sent a shiver down my spine. I looked around the room, but this time, I wasn't looking at the fancy dresses or the big flower displays. I was looking for trouble. What did he mean? Don't let him see you saw anything. My eyes landed on the little party favors sitting on the tables. They were small boxes, tied with a perfect silver ribbon. On top of each box was a little picture, a logo, stamped in gold. It was a bird, a phoenix, rising out of a machine gear. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. That picture, it belonged to my husband, David. He drew it 100 times on napkins in our little kitchen before he died. He was going to call his little repair shop Phoenix Mechanics. It was his dream, his symbol of starting over after his first business failed. It had to be a mistake. Maybe it was a popular design. But I looked closer, my hands trembling. It was exactly the same, right down to the little chip he drew in the third tooth of the gear. My husband's ghost was in this room, and I had to wonder, how did his dream end up in the hands of these cruel people? My mind was spinning. David had passed away 10 years ago, his dream of that little shop buried with him. I remember him trying so hard to get a loan from the bank to start it. He came home one night, so sad and defeated. He said a young loan officer at the bank had been so rude, telling him his idea was just a silly hobby. David never told me the man's name. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen. I typed in Richard Vance, the name of Emily's father. The search results loaded in a second. He was the founder of a huge company called Vance Innovations. My blood ran cold. The article said he started his company just 9.5 years ago. That was only 6 months after my David died. It felt like a punch right in the stomach. A terrible, ugly thought started to grow in my mind. I kept scrolling through the pictures online. Then I saw it. It was an old newspaper photo of Richard Vance winning an award. Behind him was a big sign, and on that sign was the name of his first company, Phoenix Logistics. Was this all a terrible coincidence, or was it something much, much worse? I had to talk to my son. I had to show him what I was seeing. I stood up from my lonely table and walked through the crowd until I reached the head table where Mark was sitting. I waited for a moment and then gently touched his arm. "Mark," I said softly, "can I talk to you for a minute?" His mother-in-law, Eleanor, looked at me with pure ice in her eyes. "Carol, we're about to open the gifts. I'm sure it can wait," she said. Her voice was sweet like honey, but her words were a command. Mark looked from her to me, his face full of confusion. He just wanted everyone to be happy. "Mom, can it wait? We're kind of busy," he said, pulling his arm away. Being dismissed by my own son, in front of all these people, hurt more than anything else they had done all day. He just couldn't see how they were treating me. I walked away, feeling the weight of the little knitted blanket in my bag. As I turned my back, I heard Richard, Emily's father, chuckle. He said to my son, "Some people just don't understand their place." Did my own son believe that too? Soon it was time to open the presents. Eleanor and Richard, Emily's parents, made a big show of it. They gave my daughter-in-law a key to a brand new car, a big shiny SUV parked right outside with a giant red bow on it. Everyone cheered. Then they announced they'd started a savings account for the baby with enough money to send him to college. It was a performance, meant to show everyone how powerful and generous they were. When it was my turn, the whole room went quiet. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me as I walked up with my simple wrapped gift. I handed it to Emily. "I knitted this for the baby," I said quietly. She gave me a real smile, the only one I'd gotten all day. "Thank you, Carol, it's beautiful," she said, and I could tell she meant it. But as she unfolded the soft blue blanket, her mother, Eleanor, let out a little laugh. "How quaint," she said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "A little something from the old world." A few people giggled. My gift, my hours of work and love, was turned into a joke. Was there any piece of my heart they wouldn't try to crush today? I had to get away. I rushed to the ladies' room, my face burning with shame. I splashed cold water on my cheeks and stared at myself in the fancy mirror. The waiter's words came back to me. "Don't let him see you saw anything." What had I seen? I thought about the house itself, this big mansion they called the Manor. On a crazy impulse, I pulled out my phone and searched for the house in the town's public records. I wanted to know who owned this place full of bad memories. The website loaded, and it showed the house was sold 2 years ago. My eyes scanned down to the name of the person who sold it. My whole body went cold. It was sold by the family of a Mr. Henderson. I knew that name. Mr. Henderson was the head banker, the man who personally met with my husband David all those years ago. He was the one who looked at David's dream and said, "No." It wasn't just bad luck. It felt like they were holding this party on top of my husband's grave. But why? Why would they buy this specific house? It all started to click together in my mind, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. It was a dark and ugly picture. First, Mr. Henderson, the bank manager, tells my husband his idea is worthless. Then, just a few months later, Richard Vance, who was a junior worker at that same bank, starts his own company with my husband's idea and even my husband's logo. Then, years later, Richard buys Mr. Henderson's expensive house. This wasn't just one man stealing an idea. This was two men working together. They had conspired to destroy my husband and build their fortune on his broken dreams. The sadness I had carried for 10 years turned into a hot, burning anger. They didn't just take a business plan from David. They took his spirit. They took our future. And now, they were trying to erase me, the last piece of him, from the family he should have been here to see. I looked at my reflection in the fancy mirror. The sad, tired old woman I saw this morning was gone. In her place was a widow with a war to win. But how do you fight a monster like Richard Vance when all you have is the truth? I walked back to the party, but I wasn't the same woman who had run to the restroom in tears. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I looked at the giant ice sculpture of a swan and the fountain overflowing with champagne. Before, it had all made me feel small and poor. Now, I saw it for what it was. A house of lies, built with my husband's stolen dreams. Richard Vance was a thief, hiding in plain sight, and he had made a very big mistake. He had invited me into his house. But what could I do? If I stood up and started yelling the truth, they would just call me a crazy old woman. His rich friends would laugh, and my own son, Mark, would probably try to calm me down and apologize for my behavior. I needed more than just a story. I needed proof. I needed a witness. And then I remembered the young waiter, the boy who had whispered that strange warning to me. He saw something. He knew something wasn't right here. I scanned the bustling room, no longer looking for my son, but for the one person in this whole terrible place who had shown me a flicker of kindness. I had to find him. I found him clearing dishes from my lonely table back in the shadows. His name tag said Leo. I walked up to him, making sure no one was watching. "Thank you for what you said earlier," I whispered. "But I need to know. What did you mean?" Leo looked over his shoulder, his eyes wide with fear. He was just a kid trying to do his job. "Mr. Vance," he said, keeping his voice low. "He's been acting crazy all week. He fired a gardener for a few weeds. I heard him yelling about no loose ends and needing to protect the family legacy." The word legacy made my blood boil. It was my husband's legacy, not his. "Leo, did you hear him say anything else? Anything about a company called Phoenix?" The boy shook his head. "No," he said, "but you should talk to Ben, the old groundskeeper. He's worked on this property for 30 years, even back when Mr. Henderson owned it. Vance kept him on, but Ben can't stand him. He knows things." He pointed toward the back gardens, to a small dark shed hidden behind the rose bushes. My heart was pounding. Was I about to walk into more danger, or was I about to find the final piece of the puzzle? The air was cooler out by the gardens. I found the potting shed, a small weathered building that smelled of damp earth and fertilizer. Inside, an old man with dirt under his fingernails was tending to some flowers. "Ben?" I asked. He looked up, his eyes suspicious. I knew I couldn't introduce myself as Mark's mother. That name was worthless here. So I told him the truth. "My name is Carol Thompson," I said. "I'm David Thompson's widow." His face changed instantly. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a sad sort of memory. "David," he said, his voice rough like gravel. "I remember him. He came here once, a good man with a good idea. Henderson just laughed him out of the study." My heart leaped. "Ben, did you ever see this man here?" I asked, holding out my phone with a picture of Richard Vance on the screen. Ben squinted at the phone and then let out a grunt. "Oh, the snake. He was Henderson's little shadow back then. I saw him." He looked me right in the eye. "After your husband left that day, a big box of files was delivered from the bank. The snake was here when it arrived. They were in that study all night, drinking and celebrating." They celebrated. My God, they celebrated stealing my husband's life. I finally had a witness. They had celebrated. The groundskeeper Ben's words echoed in my head as I walked back toward that loud, fake party. They had sat in that study with my husband David's dreams spread out on the table, and they had toasted their crime. They didn't just steal an idea. They stole his entire plan, the work of his life, right out of a box. The anger I felt was so pure and so strong, it made me feel steady on my feet for the first time all day. I finally had the truth, and I had a witness to back it up. But then, a cold dose of fear washed over me. What was Ben's story against a man like Richard Vance? Richard had money, lawyers, and powerful friends. He could crush an old groundskeeper like a bug. He would pay Ben to stay quiet, or he would threaten him until he was too scared to speak. They would call me a bitter, crazy old woman, and him a poor, hard-working man just trying to get by. I was holding a lit match in a rainstorm. I had the truth, but I needed a way to make it catch fire. What kind of weapon could a woman like me possibly find to fight a man like him? As I got closer to the party tent, I passed by the kitchen entrance. The head caterer, a woman with a tired, stressed face, was standing just outside, yelling into her phone. I couldn't help but overhear her. "What do you mean the payment didn't clear?" she shouted, her voice shaking with panic. "The check from Vance Innovations bounced? For this whole party? No, that's impossible." She listened for a moment, her face getting paler by the second. "You're telling me the great Richard Vance doesn't have the money to pay me?" My heart gave a little jump. A bounced check. It was such a small, sloppy mistake. All this money, all this showing off, and he couldn't even pay the caterer. It meant he was stretched thin. He was juggling. He wasn't a king in a castle. He was a man walking on a tightrope, pretending not to look down. This wasn't the big weapon I was looking for, but it was something just as important. It was a crack in his armor. It told me the monster was not as strong as he looked, and now I just had to figure out exactly where to strike. I slipped one of the little party favor boxes into my purse and sat back down at my lonely table. The noise of the party faded away as I stared at that golden logo, the phoenix rising from the gear. My David's logo. And then, a memory hit me so hard I gasped. My husband was a careful man. He always said, "You've got to protect your work, Carol, even from the sharks." Before he ever went to a bank, he went to a notary. He had every page of his business plan, every drawing, and especially that final logo design, stamped and dated by a legal witness. And the witness wasn't just anybody. It was his best friend from the army, Robert Chen. We all called him Robbie. Robbie went on to become a lawyer, a real bulldog who went after big companies that stole from little guys. He specialized in this exact thing. I remembered Robbie looking at David's logo and saying, "This is brilliant, Davy. If anyone ever tries to steal this from you, you call me, and I will tear them limb from limb." My hand trembled as I took out my phone. I still had Robbie's number saved from all those years ago. One call. That's all it would take. Did I have the courage to make it? My thumb hovered over Robbie Chen's name on my phone screen. Robbie, David's army friend. It felt like a button that could blow up the whole world. I could press it right now and tell him everything. I imagined the chaos, the lawyers, the yelling. It would be satisfying to see the shock on Richard Vance's face. But then I thought, what would happen next? He would deny everything. He would hire the best lawyers money could buy, and they would drag my name and my husband's name through the mud for years. It would be my word against his. No, that wasn't good enough. I didn't just want to win in a courtroom 5 years from now. I wanted everyone here in this room, all these people who looked down on me, to see him for what he was. I needed the truth to come out right here, right now, in a way he couldn't escape. I needed to knock him off the pedestal he built for himself, not just poke him from the ground. I put my phone down. The time wasn't right yet. I needed him to be standing in the spotlight with everyone watching before I finally pulled the rope on the trap door. Just as I was hardening my heart, a soft voice beside me made me jump. It was Emily, my daughter-in-law, her face full of worry. She was holding the blue knitted blanket I had made. "Carol," she said, and her eyes were so kind. "I'm so sorry about my mother. She can be difficult. Please don't let her ruin today for you." It was the first real kindness anyone in her family had shown me. "It's not your fault, dear," I told her, and I meant it. "I just want you and Mark to be happy." She put her hand on mine, and her touch was warm. "That blanket you made," she said, her voice getting thick with tears. "It's the most meaningful gift I've received today. It's the only thing here that feels real." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. This sweet girl was living in the same house of lies that I was looking at. She deserved better. My grandchild deserved to be born into a family built on truth, not on stolen money and secrets. This wasn't just about getting revenge for my David anymore. This was about protecting the future. And just as that thought settled in my heart, I heard the sharp ting-ting-ting of a spoon tapping against a champagne glass. Everyone went quiet. Richard Vance, Emily's father, stood up, beaming like a king. He put his arm around his wife, Eleanor. "Friends, family," he boomed, his voice filling the tent. "Thank you for celebrating this wonderful day with us, a day for new beginnings, for family, and for legacy." He smiled, looking so proud of himself. "You know, when I started my company from nothing, with just an idea and a dream, I never imagined I'd be standing here today." He was stealing my husband's story and wearing it like a brand new suit. My hand closed around my phone in my purse. "It just goes to show," he continued, puffing out his chest, "that with a little American ingenuity and a whole lot of grit, anything is possible." The crowd of his rich friends started to clap. He was painting himself as a hero, using my husband's life as the paint. He raised his glass high for a toast, a big, phony smile plastered on his face. He had absolutely no idea that he had just set the perfect stage for his own downfall. It was time to make the call. While Richard Vance was still smiling and soaking up the applause from his big speech, I slipped away. I found a quiet little spot behind a big leafy plant near the edge of the tent. My whole body was shaking, but my hands were steady. I pulled out my phone, went to my contacts, and pressed the name I hadn't called in 10 years. Robbie, David's army friend. The phone rang once, then twice. A man with a sharp, no-nonsense voice answered. "Chen." "Robbie, it's Carol Thompson, David's wife," I said, my own voice sounding surprisingly calm. There was a short pause on the other end. Then his voice got warmer. "Carol, my goodness, it's been so long. Is everything all right?" I took one last, deep breath, looked out at the party and said, "Everything is about to be. I'm at a party right now, Robbie, and I'm looking at my husband's logo on about 100 little boxes. The party is being hosted by a man named Richard Vance." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. I had lit the fuse. Now I just had to wait for the explosion. When Robbie finally spoke, his voice was different. It was cold and sharp, like a shard of glass. "Richard Vance of Vance Innovations?" he asked. "The company that used to be called Phoenix Logistics?" "The very same," I confirmed, my heart starting to beat faster. "Robbie, he was the loan officer at David's bank. He stole everything." Robbie didn't even hesitate. "Stay on the line, Carol," he said, and I could hear the sound of him typing fast on a keyboard. "Listen to me. This is important. I'm not just a regular lawyer anymore. For the last 5 years, I've been on the board of the Financial Crimes Investigative Journal." My jaw dropped. I had no idea. "We've had a file on Vance for months," Robbie continued, his voice low and intense. "We knew he was crooked, suspected he was laundering money, but we could never find where the dirty money started. We could never find his very first crime." He paused for a second. "Carol, you just gave it to us. You just gave us the original sin." I thought I was calling a lawyer about a stolen logo. But this was so much bigger than that. What had I just stepped into? "Robbie, what are you doing?" I whispered into the phone, hearing him barking orders to someone in his office. "I'm calling my best reporter," he said, his voice all business now. "Her name is Sarah Jenkins, and she's 10 minutes away from your location. I'm sending her the notarized scans of David's designs right this second. The official stamp is dated 10 years ago. It's proof that no lawyer can argue with." I felt a wave of dizziness. 10 minutes. This was all happening in 10 minutes. He wasn't finished. "Now you listen to me, Carol," Robbie said, his voice pulling me back. "Go back to your seat. Let Richard Vance enjoy the last few minutes of his life as a respected man. Just sit back and watch the show. He deserves to have an audience for what's coming." I clicked the phone off, my hand trembling. I had just called in an airstrike on this entire party. I peeked out from behind the plant. Richard was laughing, accepting congratulations from his friends. He had no idea that a storm was coming to wash him and his whole kingdom of lies away. I walked away from my hiding spot and went straight toward the head table. Richard was still laughing, but I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at my son, Mark, and his sweet wife, Emily. Before the bomb I had planted went off, I wanted to give them one last gift, a little bit of the truth. I leaned in close, so only they could hear me over the party noise. "Emily, honey," I said softly, "the little phoenix logo on your party favours, the bird on the box. My late husband David designed it. Your father was the loan officer who saw his business plan right before he started his own company." Mark just looked confused, bless his heart. But Emily's face went pale. Her eyes darted from the little box in her hand to her father, who was still laughing and holding his glass up. I saw a flicker of understanding, a terrible doubt dawn in her eyes. It was the first time, I think, she had ever looked at her father and wondered if he was a good man. The foundation of her perfect life had just started to crack. And at that exact moment, a loud voice from the entrance cut through all the music and chatter. Everyone turned to look. A woman in a sharp business suit, followed by a man with a large camera on his shoulder, was arguing with the security guards Richard had hired. The woman's voice was clear and strong. "I'm Sarah Jenkins from the Financial Crimes Investigative Journal," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm here to see Mr. Richard Vance." The party music screeched to a halt. The whole tent went silent. Richard's face, which had been so red and happy from all the champagne, turned the colour of ash. He knew that name. Everybody did. It was the most feared investigative newspaper in the country. "There must be some mistake," Richard said, trying to sound powerful as he marched toward the entrance. "This is a private party. You need to leave right now." But the reporter, Sarah Jenkins, didn't even flinch. She just held up a file in her hand and looked him dead in the eye. She wasn't there to ask for permission. She was there to take him down. What was a reporter like that doing at a simple baby shower? Richard was about to find out. In front of all his rich friends and family, Sarah Jenkins spoke, and her voice was like ice. "We have evidence that the intellectual property your entire company is founded on," she said, "was stolen from a deceased inventor named David Thompson." "My husband's name." She said my husband's name out loud for everyone to hear. "We have the original notarized designs dated 6 months before you founded your company," the reporter continued. "Would you care to comment, Mr. Vance?" The cameraman's red recording light was on, pointed right at Richard's face. "That's a preposterous, slanderous accusation," Richard blustered, but beads of sweat were popping up on his forehead. The reporter took a step closer. "We also have a witness, the groundskeeper of this estate, who is prepared to testify about your collaboration with the bank manager. And a source at the caterer tells us your check for this very event has bounced." Every single person in that room had their phone out, recording him. His perfect party had turned into his personal nightmare, broadcast for the whole world to see. And the reporter wasn't finished with him yet. She still had one more question to ask. Richard Vance stood there sputtering with no answers, The camera was in his face and his whole world was on fire. But it wasn't the reporter who delivered the final blow. It was his own daughter. A quiet voice cut through the horrible silence. "Is it true, Dad?" It was Emily. She was standing up now, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, her face pale. She was holding up one of the little party favor boxes with the Phoenix logo on it. "That blanket," she said, her voice shaking but getting stronger with every word. "The one Carol made for the baby. I just looked at it. It has the same bird stitched right into the corner." She looked from the box to her father, her eyes pleading with him to deny it, to say it was all a lie. "Tell me it's not true." But he couldn't. He just stood there, speechless, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He couldn't even look his own daughter in the eye. And in that awful, deafening silence, we all heard his confession. What would Emily do now that she knew her whole life was a lie? With her husband broken and her daughter turning away, Eleanor finally snapped. Her eyes, full of hate, landed on me. She marched right up to me, her face twisted into an ugly snarl. "You!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at my face. "You did this! You wretched, jealous old woman! You couldn't stand that we had so much and you had nothing, so you came here and you ruined my daughter's perfect day." A few weeks ago, her words would have crushed me, but now they were just noise. I looked at this woman, a queen who had just lost her entire kingdom, and I felt nothing but a sad, empty pity. "You didn't forget my name on the welcome sign, Eleanor," I said, and my voice was calm and steady. "You tried to erase me. You tried to erase my husband, but you can't erase the truth. It always finds a way out." Her insults just bounced off me. They had no power anymore. The crowd of their friends started backing away, turning their backs on them. The king and queen were standing all alone in their fallen castle. Finally, seeing the whole ugly truth, my son Mark rushed over to my side, his face full of shame and regret. "Mum," he whispered, grabbing my hand. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I should have seen it." I just squeezed his hand. He saw it now, and that's what mattered. Just then, Emily walked right past her stunned parents without even a glance. She came straight to us. She took my other hand, her eyes full of tears, but also a new kind of strength I had never seen in her before. The three of us stood there for a moment, a tiny island in the middle of a storm. We were no longer on opposite sides. We were together. Emily looked from me to Mark, the two of us holding her hands. "Let's go home," she said, her voice clear and sure. Our home. And just like that, the three of us, a new little family, walked right out of that tent, leaving the flashing cameras and all the wreckage behind. We didn't look back, but I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen now to the liars we left behind? The days after the party were a blur. The story was on every news channel, every website. The reporters were like sharks. "Phoenix rises from the ashes. Vance Innovations founder exposed as fraud," one headline read. Richard's company, his great empire built on lies, crumbled in a matter of hours. The phones at Mark and Emily's little house wouldn't stop ringing, but we didn't answer. We just stayed inside, the three of us, drinking tea at the kitchen table and watching the storm we had created. Emily was quiet, her eyes sad as she watched her family name get dragged through the mud. I took her hand one afternoon as she was staring out the window. "I'm sorry, my dear," I told her. "I never wanted to hurt you." She squeezed my hand and gave me a small, watery smile. "You didn't hurt me, Carol," she said. "You saved me." In that moment, I knew we were going to be more than just in-laws. We were family. We were safe, and we were together. But as we watched the news and heard about the lawsuits and the investigations, I knew our own private healing was just getting started. Could we really build a new life on top of so many broken pieces? A week later, we had another baby shower. Not at a big fancy mansion, but in my own small backyard. We didn't have champagne or ice sculptures. We had hot dogs on the grill and lemonade in a big glass pitcher. The only guests were my 2 best friends from church and a few of Mark's buddies from high school. It was simple, and it was perfect. My son, Mark, hung a sign he'd painted himself on our old wooden fence. He came up to me, looking proud. "I made a new sign, Mom," he said. "I wanted to get it right this time." It read, "Celebrating baby Thompson with his grandma Carol." Seeing my name written there, with love, made me want to cry with happiness. Emily sat in a lawn chair, looking more relaxed and beautiful than I had ever seen her. She opened our small gifts, things like baby socks and picture books, and she thanked everyone for each one. There was more real joy in my little backyard that afternoon than there had been in that entire soulless mansion. The past was finally behind us. All that mattered now was the new life that was about to begin. Or so I thought. A month later, my grandson was born. He was beautiful and healthy, with a little patch of dark hair just like his grandpa. We named him David. One evening, I was rocking little David to sleep, humming an old song my mother used to sing to me. Mark brought in the mail and handed me a letter. It was from Robbie Chen, my late husband's lawyer friend. I opened it expecting an update on the lawsuit against Richard. The first part of the letter was just that. Richard's company was finished, and he was likely going to jail. But it was the last paragraph that made my blood run cold. "Carol," Robbie wrote, "in going through the seized bank files, we found something else. It seems the bank manager, Henderson, had a silent partner in several of his dirty deals. Someone who helped plan things from the beginning." I read the next line, and the whole room felt like it tilted. It was his wife, Eleanor. I folded the letter, my hand shaking just a little. I looked down at the sweet sleeping baby in my arms. I had won the war against Richard Vance, but the letter in my lap told me a chilling secret. His quiet, cruel wife had been the real snake in the grass all along, and I had a feeling her story was only just beginning.